Uh, we just had a really great Cosmos. Oh, now we're live. In the words of Cryptocita, buenos dias from Medellin, Colombia. We just had a really great Cosmos Medellin event yesterday. It was a lot of fun. Over 200 people showed up, and we just talking about the SDK, right? Talking about Cosmoverse, all the events coming up. Really awesome event. But going to dive in here to our RWA class, our workshop, talking a lot about just general considerations and then going into a little bit of architecture. So with me today, Ezra and Matt, right? Ezra leads product for Keychain. Matt is a founding dev of Keychain, really like the mastermind behind of our original set of code and direction and strategy and everything that we're building here. So tons of experience in the RWA sector. So super excited to hear from him. But if you guys want to do like a super quick intro, feel free. Otherwise, let's just dive right into the presentation, not waste much time. But yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that was a great little intro, Alex. Just to expand, Matt has incredible experience in the RWA. Really, I feel like somewhat of a leader, particularly within the Cosmos RWA space. So just excited to have Matt with us today. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate your time. We're excited for your insight. Let's get rocking.
Yeah, I mean, I can introduce a little bit myself as well. So, I'm Matt. I've basically been developing in the Web3 space, as Ezra mentioned, a lot on the Cosmos side of things for 6+ years now, and I've been a software engineer for over a decade now. So I have that experience, and I'm very excited to talk about RWAs today in regards to Keychain. So let's get going.
Awesome. So while Matt kind of pulls up a presentation, right, for those who are joining for the first time, right, Keychain, we're L1 in the Cosmos ecosystem, focused on the future of emerging market finance, right, building a lot of the tech stack here in emerging markets. Most of our team is based in LATAM. And we, are really focused on a lot of the key themes that are starting to emerge in this space, right? And a big theme of that is RWA. And, unlike more developed markets, right, these traditional finance and emerging markets are really monopolized by a lot of the major banks who run, right, these monetization desks. And it really just clogs a lot of the liquidity that happens in between each country, right? And a lot of like current fintech applications really can't fix that. And so that's why Web3 blockchain, right, is changing a lot of this type of communication. And particularly in LATAM, it's the hub. It's one of the mines, no gold mines, no pun intended, right, of RWA features. So Matt, I don't know if you got the presentation you want to share. Let's kind of dive into what we got going on. Sometimes it takes a second to really show up on StreamYard here.
Yep. I have it sharing, but I think we need to switch.
Sometimes it takes like 5-10 seconds for it to like show on our side.
Okay. There we go. All right. So let's move to the next slide.
Cool. So again, spoke a little bit briefly on, who we are, what we're building, right? Obviously, RWA is a huge feature. We're working right now on our RWA module, which is custom built, very similar to the Cosmos module, but definitely has some really cool interoperable solutions that we're currently integrating. But so diving in, next slide, Matt, because we're going to get into just things to consider that are really important when you're tokenizing an asset, whether it's something more simple or more complex, bigger on the size, but legal and regulatory compliance, asset valuation, right, smart contract and development and token design, and obviously market and liquidity, which is a really big one. Even it's pretty easy to actually tokenize anything, but will there be a market for it? And the tech and the structure, right? So kind of like the first side here, the legal and regulatory compliance is a massive, issue, I'd say, depending on where these assets are being tokenized, right, and where they're being offered. Those are like the two big indicators, and you really have to understand, speak with local counsel in each jurisdiction to see if they are complying with securities laws, right? And to see actually where they're being traded too. And a big part of that also is your KYC, KYB, right? Who are the beneficial owners behind the project? Where is the asset? Are they actually owned by the people who are saying that they're owned by, right? And then you can also put that on chain now. So in the Cosmos RWA module and the one that we're customizing, a lot of that can go on chain and can be very clear. And then securities laws differ in each country, right? In LATAM, they're a lot more friendly than other jurisdictions like the United States. So you just need to make sure that you're complying with local law. And then wherever these security these tokens, if they are security tokens or not, where they are traded, if you're complying with regulation there. Ezra, Matt, feel free to jump in, and comment in different areas. In the asset valuation side, depending on what the asset is, making sure pricing is accurate, right? So a lot of like public commodities, you can price into oracles or different sources like gold, silver, right? That's clear. But if it's a private asset, just a real estate building, there's a little bit of consideration that needs to go in there. I don't know, Matt, if you want to chime in. I heard you kind of about to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree exactly with what you're saying. And these 2 points are actually one of the biggest blockers within the RWA space, right? So regulatory compliance, making sure that those assets that you're tokenizing actually do comply. Otherwise, you can get in a really big trouble. And also asset valuation on a technical level, that's also a challenge because you need to set up oracles that will accurately price those assets, right? So if they're incorrectly priced, your digital assets, your tokenized, your tokens on chain won't reflect accurately, and that would become a problem. So there's a lot of mechanisms to solve pricing oracles. There's different DeFi protocols that would help enable that. But yeah, I mean, we can deep dive a little bit later on with that.
I would say one more thing to almost add on to this, and I don't know if it is here in terms of token design, in terms of fractional ownership, but comes down to the utility and rights and how that is managed, right? That there's some administrative aspects that come into consideration that should be thought of and expanded on in your project. What happens to the asset after, if it's privately owned, or if it's in private custody instead of like a public commodity, right? Obviously we know how those are managed, but when it comes down to like a home, is there property management that's handling the home and giving timeshare to the people who have fractional ownership, or is it being rented out and profits are distributed? There's a bit more that needs to be considered on how the asset itself is managed.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. I mean, we even have projects in our ecosystem where it's commodities producers and they're already selling. They just need to, tokenize those assets in NFT and make sure that the payment terms are on chain, right? So like, it really like it's actually an area that is really widespread in its depth and consideration when you're doing stuff. So yeah, really important to always talk about that. And Matt, like, so on the smart contract development, token design, I'll maybe start off with a question. Like, is there any like clear standardization for how on the tech side we are tokenizing assets?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, I mean, in terms of, those tokens on chain, they could be as simple as NFTs, ERC standards, for instance. And this is just one example, right? So you can use ERC 1155s, which are semi-fungibles, or ERC 721s, which are, non-fungible. Your regular NFTs, your commonly regular NFTs, but the assets backing those makes it a little bit more complex. So depending on how you're structuring, the protocol or ecosystem, you could be looking at modifying those standard NFT contracts, for instance. So, if your protocol demands for redemption of assets, right? For example, you might need to bake that into your smart contract and, put in a redeem function that needs to call, a different function that would trigger another smart contract within your ecosystem. So in terms of, I guess, on a base level, there are standards where you can use, those NFT smart contract standards, but more than likely, if your protocol demands it, or ecosystem, you would probably need to add more on top of that. So that's what I would say. That's what I've observed in different projects out there. So yeah.
Got it. No, awesome, awesome point, right? I'm sure you're going to go into that a little bit more in these next slides, right? But I know on the market liquidity slide, like we have tons of individuals or projects who, yeah, let's tokenize an asset, and they do it, and then where are the liquidity? Where's the buy side going to come from, right? And that's kind of like on the business side, one of the most important considerations, whether you're working with like an RWA specific launch pad where you actually have interested buyers who will benefit from, let's say in real estate, the fractionalization of these assets, right? Which is a big theme here in LATAM because a lot of users can't afford to buy, right, real estate in bulk. Fractionalization allows them to do that. And then, where is that liquidity? Where is it being traded, right? Where can users exit, right? Is it yield bearing, right? Is there a mechanism for this asset being yield bearing, right? So all really important considerations. And I think, Ezra, you can always expand, but we were just having this conversation privately like an hour ago at breakfast where, look at what others are doing, right, in this space, see what buttons they have, see what the users have. Let that remind you if you're building, what considerations can be done from the user interface side. And that's always an important consideration to have.
100%. Yeah, and that is like you can even look at Web 2 examples that exist out there. There is fractionalized ownership that exists in the Web 2 world. It's just not very efficient, and that's what blockchain is here to do. So you don't have to. You're not reinventing the wheel entirely. You can reference successful Web 2 organizations and Web 3ify them.
Yeah, agreed. And then
Yeah.
that goes into the next point. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was just going to add, like, on top of what Ezra had mentioned, yeah, I mean, like, I think in my opinion and perception at least, with RWAs, I think you're kind of taking traditional real world assets and how they operate, and you're using Web3 as a proxy to get all the advantages of what Web3 offers, right? So that's the whole point of RWA tokenization and creating these projects. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and then on like the technology infrastructure, right? Like I think we made this point because it relates to market and liquidity in the sense of like where, if you're doing an initial offering of these tokens, like where are you doing them, right? Are they private sold within your pre-existing network, right? Are they being sold on a very popular securities platform here in LATAM, Bitfinex Securities, global as well, but tons of project based here in LATAM. And then are they interoperable, which really addresses the prior thing of liquidity, and that's like probably one of the biggest trending things right now, right? Like, are they connected to IBC? Are they native to 100, or can they be native to 100 over 100 chains? These are really big considerations that will help pretty much everything that we just spoke about, and I think is kind of like the final piece. So I don't know if any more comments from you guys before we move on and just kind of start getting into the thick of things.
Yeah, I think we can move forward.
Cool. So go
right.
ahead, Matt, take it away, and we'll.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of the RWA or types of RWA projects out there. At least this is what I've seen out there. So I guess you can kind of break it down into three categories. So you have your RWA marketplaces, you have your RWA infrastructure, and you have your RWA backed stablecoins. So with marketplaces, these are generally like with any marketplaces, they support trading assets, and in RWA's case, it supports trading assets of tokenized assets, which are backed by real world assets. So you can expect to see things like luxury goods, luxury watches, things like that, traditional financial assets, so stocks, for instance. Um, and a lot of these um, marketplaces, they allow you to trade NFTs that are backed by those RWAs. So those are the different marketplace projects that, RWA marketplace projects that I've seen out there commonly, and they kind of have those common features. And then you have RWA infrastructure. So marketplaces and infrastructure, all of these kind of can come in tandem, or they kind of relate to each other in one or another. But infrastructure, you can kind of see it as a ecosystem, more of an ecosystem or a protocol. So it's a set of rules or, an environment that supports RWAs. So typically, if a project is creating an ecosystem or a protocol, most likely they've also built a place for users where they can interact trading those assets. So like the marketplace. Um, Infrastructure, when you build an RWA infrastructure, it's actually a combination of on-chain and off-chain. So on-chain, you're selecting, a blockchain where you would be tokenizing these assets. But a lot of people, I think, kind of miss the effort that goes off chain as well, because on top of tokenizing these assets, you need a way to manage these assets off chain, right? The RWAs. So typically you would need a warehouse or like an inventory management system. All of that stuff cannot be on chain, right? The only thing that's on chain is typically smart contracts that are handling those tokenized assets, right? The tokens themselves, but the physical items need to be, or traditional financial assets or whatever it is off chain, they need to be operated and managed separately by a different system. So that's where the whole infrastructure idea comes in, where it kind of encapsulates the on-chain and off-chain parts of the system into one big thing.
Yeah, 100%. And even to expand on that, when I originally mentioned like a home, for example, but even a commodity would need some sort of
Of course.
offline mechanism, perhaps an API that's making a call to an exchange, like a commodities exchange, to execute on the order or to sell on the order
Absolutely.
based on the governance of the
Yeah.
ownership of the commodity. Correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And these inventory management systems, like there are businesses that are built for that, right? Like, so you can imagine with RWA projects, they're actually tackling on, inventory management along with, on-chain things and meshing that together to make it work, right? So it's a very, RWAs are definitely, a new, uh, fairly new concept within the Web3 space. And it is a challenging concept, but if you think about it, it's an amazing concept because you are using Web3 as a proxy to manage these, Web2 assets, right? So it's great. And, you might have heard a term like DPIN out there. So that kind of ties in with RWAs as well. DPIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network. So that's the idea of having those off-chain management systems, things like warehouses, storage facilities, all of that, and doing it in a decentralized way so that one company isn't in charge of having that storage facility for the assets. You need to tie it within your systems, possibly on utilize on-chain technology to be able to decentralize that. So examples would be maybe incentivizing storage facilitators to jump into the network to be able to store your physical items, right, and get into the protocol. So all of that, I think, kind of falls under the RWA infrastructure category, I would say. And then the last category, I'm sure there are other types of RWA projects out there, but these are the categories that I'm seeing very commonly are RWA-backed stablecoins. So they're essentially traditional financial assets managed with a Web3 asset proxy. So can be represented. So for example, as a yield-bearing token, I think Alex mentioned that earlier, within Web3. So for example, you have kind of a token on-chain that is backed by, say, a short-term US Treasury. And you know, these are kind of assets that you would want to hold on chain because you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you have the characteristics of those financial, traditional financial assets outside of, the blockchain, but you also get things like, yield bearing tokens on chain where you can participate in different DeFi protocols, use it as collateral within a DeFi protocol, things like that. So possibilities are endless, clearly, if you do that, right? So, and yeah, like I said, it's kind of like a hybrid system there where you get kind of like a regulated asset, which, what you have outside of the blockchain, but you're using kind of all of these different Web3 protocols to be able to get more out of that asset, right? So that's what you would get if you would be interacting with these RWA projects on the blockchain.
Yeah, and I mean, RWA-backed stablecoins, I think, is the biggest use case in
Yeah.
RWA. And
Yeah.
like when we talk about evolution, revolution, what's happening, like especially in emerging markets, right, where it's becoming more of a necessity to actually interact with stablecoins, it's causing, it's more of a revolution. The amount of user adoption, it's eating into, the transactional volume of traditional processors really quickly, especially on the cross-border side. Hugely popular, right? Giving other people access, right? Giving foreigners from the the U.S., right? Giving citizens in LATAM access to dollar-backed and yielding stable coins, right, with interest is huge. It's massive theme right now that we're seeing. But yeah,
Yeah,
thanks, Matt.
I agree. And like to add a little bit on that, you know, it's kind of like I see it as kind of like almost like a middle step to really getting into like DeFi within Web3, because you know a lot of people who transition from Web2 to Web3, more than likely they know the different traditional financial assets, right? They know stocks, they know bonds, all of those things. And if you throw somebody in Web3 and go, okay, go to DeFi protocol, create a flash loan, and then take out Arbitrum tokens, a person coming from Web2 will be like, what is that? Like, they'll be completely confused. So at least with this, you kind of have a interesting transitionary step, because they know that that particular digital asset is backed by what they're familiar with. So they'll be like, oh, okay, so I'll get this, and then what else can you do with this now that I'm in the Web3 space? So it's almost like a nice entry point for traditional financial asset users, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
agreed. I agreed, and like, and a lot of times they're just bridges. We know tons of companies who tokenize U.S. stocks, securities, ETFs, whatever. It's just an easier way for other people in other countries to have access to these instruments. And where current Web2 financial infrastructure just can't provide that. So, yeah, let's keep going.
all right. All right, so RWA project. So like I said, 3 categories. These are some examples. I won't deep dive into them. Feel free to obviously do your research and deep dive more into it. But these are some of the things that I've mentioned that kind of falls within these categories. And some of them have characteristics of other categories, but I placed them in what I think their primary would be. So there's a project called Tangible. Like I said, marketplace of NFTs backed by RWAs. So you're looking at, things like luxury goods, wine, all of that stuff. Very tangible assets that could be tokenized on chain. You have swarm markets. So these are more, they're also, backed by real world assets, but they, rather than kind of like an NFT marketplace where you think traditional, OpenSea or something like that, they're more of a AMM style. So like pools, balancer, Uniswap style, where you're participating in pools, and these pools are made of assets that are backed by those real world assets, so like traditional asset stocks, things like that. So and then of course keychain can obviously allow, RWA markets. You could easily build a marketplace on top of keychain because it supports EVM, and then deploying those Solidity contracts that support NFTs would be very, very easy to do. So possibilities are endless there. RWA infrastructure, so DPIN. So there's a project called Story Protocol. It's the idea, it's an ecosystem actually, or protocol that mints NFTs, and those NFTs are backed by copyrights. And the protocol kind of offers a way to access those rights and managing those rights, and also profit distribution for whoever is entitled to those rights. So it's a very interesting project, and it's a nice way to kind of manage those copyrights and, distributing whoever deserves benefits from those rights, right? Another example of an RWA infrastructure project is Plume Network. So Plume Network, like I said, some of these are intertwined. So they also have an RWA marketplace. Essentially, it's an layer 2 blockchain that facilitates tokenized assets. So it has the infrastructure and marketplace to enable, trading these NFTs that are backed by RWAs. So I think they have a marketplace that allows you to trade, say, tokenized sneakers, right? Shoes, watches, things like that. And of course, Keychain has the infrastructure that allows you to be able to create these kind of different protocols. Just because of Cosmos interoperability, and it supports EVM module as well. So it would be very easy to create an RWA infrastructure. But keep in mind, though, that like what we talked about in the earlier slide, these are all on-chain things, but they're like, these projects do have off-chain systems that complements these on-chain initiatives, right? So just keep that in mind with these RWA infrastructure. There is currently, right now, there is kind of no way to be able to have it completely 100% off-chain, because you are dealing with physical assets, right? So you do need that off-chain component to it. And then, of course, RWA-backed stablecoins. With what Alex said, it's like the most, it's the largest use case, I would say, for RWAs. Ondo Finance is one of the projects that I've noticed who partnered with a chain called Noble, which is a Cosmos-based chain. So right there, you already know that this is possible within the Cosmos ecosystem where Keychain is. And their token, which is, I believe it's called USDY, it's a yield-bearing token, and that's backed by 65% bank deposits and 35% short-term US Treasuries. So those are the kind of projects that you would see within the RWA space. These are some of the notable ones, and these are fairly new. So with RWA being, a fairly new concept within the Web3 space, these projects are also fairly new. So you can imagine that there's a huge market for that. There's a huge market for RWAs in the coming, years, right? And yeah, Keychain is very much positioned for that, right? That's why I've included it in all three categories, because I think Keychain has the infrastructure to support all these different projects.
Yeah, we do. We do. And even like people can build on KeyX, right? Which is more of like the centralized version to seek liquidity there too. There's of ideas that we put forward on that side. Yeah, and there's just, yeah, from the stablecoin side, from the infrastructure, from the marketplace, there's a lot going on. And again, building on this theme of like connecting developed markets with emerging markets, it's a really big trend happening right now. So awesome stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Shall we move on? All right. All right. So we talked a little bit about the different components of RWA projects, but let's kind of deep dive a little bit into it on what that actually looks like. Hopefully you guys can see this, but this is sort of like a high level architecture for a typical RWA marketplace and infrastructure project, let's say. So like I said, with any RWA project, there is a kind of off-chain component to it, and that component is typically centralized because the company or the protocol that's managing it will need to really operate that off-chain, and that needs to work in tandem with the on-chain thing. So the flow is typically this. You have a user, right? So say me, I want to, trade let's just go with the case of I have a vintage bottle of wine that I want to digitize. I want to turn it into a token. How do I do that? And moreover, how do I once I have that token, how do I trade this and make a profit off of it or get a loan out of it? All of these things. I want to do all of these things. How do I do that? I have no idea how to do that. So I'm this guy. I'm this user right here. So typically I will jump into a marketplace that offers RWA, trading facilities. And so I find a marketplace. That's this. And that marketplace is typically connected to the blockchain. So let's give an example of Keychain, right? So Keychain is this blockchain here. But that marketplace is also connected to a backend service that Key is operating, right? So those in tandem will give you the ability to be able to trade or put up a listing or all of that with your NFTs on the marketplace. It'll give you information about where your NFT is, transaction hashes, all of those things. The backend service and the blockchain will need to work in tandem to be able to give you that ability in the marketplace. Okay, great. So you have these three. Now comes the interesting part that is a little bit unique to RWA projects. So with a backend service, it needs to store all the data that it's observed from the blockchain and also some custom data that needs to be tagged to the blockchain data. And all of that needs to be saved in some sort of database. So perhaps some of the data could be saved in the blockchain, but most of the data needs to be saved in a database. Now you ask, okay, we're in the Web3 space. Why are we talking about database? That's like off-chain, that's not decentralized at all. That's ridiculous. Let's not do that. We need to do that because like I said, there are off-chain systems that will need to work in tandem for this RWA concept to work. And that's where this part comes in over here. So inventory management, warehouse operator, and the storage facility, the physical storage facility where my wine will be stored. So all of that in the traditional Web 2 space, all of this is managed by an inventory management systems. There are businesses that are built just for this part. And of course, they have databases that will manage the data that's kept in that inventory. So this needs to be available for this backend service, and it also needs to get updates from the blockchain in case things like NFTs are transferred or they get burned for redemption. All of that needs to be orchestrated by the backend service. So you're kind of dealing with two, you can call it systems, where you have your off-chain and you have your on-chain here. All of that gets orchestrated through the database and the backend service here, and then gets shown to the user here at the marketplace. So in the use case of, say, my wine, maybe the marketplace gives me the ability to mint an NFT that's backed by my wine, right? So the process will be, I'm a user, I go into this marketplace, I hit mint, right? And then I give a description of, I have this vintage wine, maybe 2008 or maybe even, more expensive. And then the marketplace tells me I have to ship it to Key, where they have a warehouse. So I'll be shipping my wine to, say, their warehouse facility, and they will store my wine in their warehouse securely. Maybe they even have a camera installed where I can view my wine and make sure that it's still there, it's still intact. And at the same time, the marketplace would mint me, or Key would mint me, an NFT that represents the ownership of that wine. So now, yeah.
So this is just an excellent graph. It's or chart here, very simple and to understand. But it's
Yeah, I tried to make it very high level.
the complexities behind RWA and the real logistics, that
Yeah,
will go into play.
it's very high level, but you guys can see the complexity that goes behind RWA projects, right? So, and all the different components that it takes. So,
And mind you, I would say, Matt, just to, like, technically that warehouse operator could be an API into some sort
absolutely.
of commodities exchange. It doesn't have to be a person.
Yeah,
This
this could be
physical
a
product is going to have to be until we have robots reading it with the scanner.
Yeah, we got to utilize those AI, right? So, this could be a third-party service. Like, all of these things does not have to be built by one company, right? Like the whole objective here is try to create like an ecosystem, or like an infrastructure that would work with everything. So, yeah, you send your wine, and then you have security in place, all that stuff. API, warehouse operator, whatever it might be, inventory management, and then that all the inventory management will basically have a list of what is in storage, and then that is normally captured within a database. Or maybe if there's a way to decentralize that, that would be more ideal. But from what I've seen in examples out there, database is normally the answer because it's easy, scalable, and could also track data from on-chain and off-chain as well. So if somebody were to want to see, okay, what are the different items that are stored in this warehouse, I can easily check in this inventory management system, because it would be stored in this database. And then maybe it would be paired with things like the mint hash, right? Your receipt essentially on chain of when that was minted. Vice versa, if I wanted to redeem my NFT and get back my bottle of wine, I can do that, and it would just be the reverse process. However, the difference on chain would be, I would be burning my NFT. So there might be a functionality within the marketplace where it's like, redeem your item, and then I give my NFT, I burn it, and then that burn is recorded within the back end service, maybe recorded within the database. Inventory management sees that, and then that signals the whoever operates the warehouse, or whatever operates the warehouse, sends back that bottle of wine. That burn basically triggers sending back that bottle of wine to me. Or maybe I sold my NFT and somebody else is trying to redeem that bottle of wine and it goes to somebody else. So that's kind of the structure. There's a lot of components in there. And then, yeah, maybe we can deep dive a little bit more in how we could possibly build that, unless there's anybody else.
Yeah, no, all great points, Matt. I mean, there's so much that could be built and used for this hackathon, just like the NFT marketplace, right? Like Ezra spoke on the APIs that communicate between actual warehousing, right? So there's whole inventory management systems that could be built. There's just so much, right? Whether it's related to our current existing infrastructure or expanding beyond that, or something that builders in this hackathon operate themselves, right? Like it's just, the options really are limitless.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that ties back with like, if you're worried about, you want to build an RWA project, say on Keychain, and you're thinking, how am I going to build this part? I don't have a warehouse. I don't want to hire a warehouse operator. Yeah, there are services out there that does this. There are APIs that you could totally connect to this. So there are endless possibilities. So
I think a lot of it depends on what you're fractionalizing. You know what I mean? What you're tokenizing. If it's a physical product, you're gonna have to interact with a human no matter what. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
In some facet or another, whether it's a third party, whether it's an internal operation, whatever it may be. But yeah, just wanted to expand on that.
Yeah. And, tying back to the first few slides we talked about, obviously, this is a very high level architecture and it touches more on the technical side, but you do have to consider things like regulations, right? Like being able to accept assets, physical assets that are, within, compliance of the jurisdiction that you're operating on, right? So those are also things that you need to consider when you're starting an RWA project like this. So
love it.
All right. Let's move on. Yeah. So tech stack consideration. So I'm obviously in a software engineering perspective and mindset, and the first thing I think about when I hear projects is how, what tech stack can I use to start building? And these tech stacks can vary. Obviously, you use what you're comfortable with, but from what I've seen, JavaScript, it's a very, very popular language. There are a lot of frameworks that are built using JavaScript, especially in the Web3 space. JavaScript is very, very much used. JavaScript, TypeScript. So from what I've noticed, you see a lot of front end, so marketplaces that are built in React, TypeScript, just because you can use many Web3 libraries that are very developed and maintained. So things like Web3.js or Ethers, those are very popular libraries that are used in Web3 development. Backend service, so again, Node.js, which is JavaScript, for similar reasons of JS front-end framework. Blockchain, so this is an interesting selection of your tech stack. I would say Keychain is very much positioned for this, but I would definitely pick a blockchain maybe that has something where EVM is EVM compatibility for Solidity smart contracts, which Keychain has EVM compatibility. Just because there's a lot of documentation for Solidity smart contracts, there's a lot of standards already in place. Not to say that you can't do this with Rust smart contracts or whatever else, or like maybe native development on, say, Cosmos, like as a Cosmos module. But I just think that there are a lot of projects out there that are using smart contracts written in Solidity that you can easily take, or make an example of, and try to replicate that and add on to it. So it would be a lot easier if you start off on Solidity and then just go from there. So that would be my recommendation. Database, we talked about having this database briefly. I would highly recommend a relational database, just because you have a lot of data from on-chain and off-chain that you need to connect with each other, right? So of course you need relational type database to be easily to query those data points and data sets in a meaningful way. Databases like MongoDB, which is NoSQL, they're great, they're scalable, but I believe it'll be hard to be able to aggregate those data sets between the two worlds of on-chain and off-chain. So you'll have a lot easier time if you pick a relational database. And GraphQL, I would say this is optional. GraphQL is a way for you to query that data from your database in almost like like you're querying a database. So you're using like SQL. So typically when you have a backend service and you query a database, you have your application logic as a REST endpoint. You can communicate with that endpoint, and then you get the data. It would be a lot easier if you have your backend service and you can query your backend service like you're querying the database, so you can get the data that you want. Because again, you will have a lot of data in this database, and you want to be able to query it so that you get the information that you want, right? And that typically means having the off-chain data and the on-chain data aggregated in a meaningful way so that it makes sense to you. So going back to that wine use case, maybe I want to see, if there's an expiration on, the listing of my wine on the marketplace, right? So that statement basically has multiple data points of on-chain and off-chain data. So you want to aggregate that in a way where you can easily get your answer, and GraphQL will do that for you. So it's optional, and it saves you a lot of time for creating those application logic within your backend service. So this is the tech stack that I would recommend for developers. But of course, it's everything's there are different tech stacks out there, and it's all possible. It's just a matter of making it easier for yourself, right? And yeah.
Agreed, Matt. And one thing I'll just say, like, we think, obviously we're big fans of the Cosmos tech stack,
Yeah.
but we're bigger fans of IBC, right? And these cross-chain kind of protocols. And so building with these like kind of more EVM standards, and then in our network connecting them to IBC gives the user that tokenized asset, and the user, right, more access from a user experience and from a kind of a supply experience to different networks, different chains. And having that centerpiece is really important, we think, within the RWA space, right? Because you can tokenize any asset, but will you have liquidity? Will there be users? Will there be purchasers? Will there be people trading? And these type of basics, not basics, but just considerations that the tech stack will really be the foundation for then business development teams to go kind of turn it into a reality, right? So like tech is always the core of of the will it work or not,
Yeah, absolutely. And like, to add more to that, like, you mentioned users, right? It really, so with Keychain, like I said, Keychain enables EVM compatibility. That means that you can actually take tools like MetaMask, for instance, right? Like MetaMask is a hugely used wallet provider and it can connect with Keychain, right? So those people that are not too used to the Web3 space, but they have MetaMask because it's the wallet that they use to manage their tokens. They can use that with Keychain in tandem with with these RWA projects. So in terms of blockchain selection, it makes sense to pick an EVM compatible chain like Keychain to be able to utilize those tools that there's a large user base for, right? So that would mean that if you pick those tools, then you will have those user base carry over to your RWA project, which is what you want. So yeah, all right. Next slide. So a little bit more detail, and I could show you an example of these. Like I said, Keychain, I suggest checking out the repository. There's a lot of tools there that I think could help you out in your development on the Keychain. Cosmos-based libraries. Keychain is Cosmos-based under the hood. And Cosmos offers, a wide variety of libraries as well. If you are going through, a JavaScript framework, Cosm.js is a good generalized library utility for your development. Some notable JS libraries as well, again, sticking with the JavaScript tech stack. You have your Web3.js, Ethers, and VM. These are all popular libraries that you can develop dApps for that connects to EVM-based compatibility chains. And then, of course, if we're talking about EVM, we're talking about Solidity development as well. You could also be looking at Viper development, although I think Solidity is more of a, I guess, industry-wide standard smart contract development when it comes to EVM-based chains. Some of these tools, so with Solidity developments, Hard Hat is a framework that allows you to develop, Solidity contracts. Remix is more of a, I guess you can say, like a UI that you can develop on and also deploy these smart contracts to whatever chain you want. And Open Zeppelin Contracts Wizard, which is a very interesting tool, which I can show you actually right now. So let me show that quickly. I have that up here. So like I was saying, this is kind of Remix right here. Let's go learning. Maybe let's close this for now. So this is what Remix looks like. It looks, very similar to a code editor. You have a bit of Solidity code here, and then you kind of have your file structure here. And you have these kind of tools on the side for Remix that enables you to do things like searching your files. This compiles your Solidity contract. And then, of course, you can deploy and run transactions against your deployed contracts, all within Remix. So if you're not familiar, or you don't want to deal with frameworks like Hard Hat, or you're not really a developer and you're kind of unsure about code editors and frameworks, Remix kind of makes it into like one-stop shop kind of deal where you can deploy your smart contracts for your RWA project. Another one that I was talking about was the Open Zeppelin Contract Wizard. So this literally gives you a template of what your contract will look like without even programming a single thing in. So you can literally generate a Solidity contract without typing anything in. So for example, if you want your NFT, so we're looking at ERC 721, which is your pretty standard NFT smart contract. You're looking at, if you want to make it mintable, you just click that, and then as you can see, it created a safe mint function there that will allow users to be able to communicate with, well, the owners here. And then you can make it burnable as well, which more than likely, if you're building an RWA project, if you go back to the example of the architecture that I showed, you need a way to be able to redeem your assets back, and normally that's through burning your NFT. So you might want to make your NFT burnable, and then you can add a bunch of options here. As you can see, you can also, generate an ERC20 smart contracts here, or ERC 1155, which is semi-fungibles. Again, you have all these options. You can even name your token here. You can set a URI for your metadata. All of these things are possible with generating here. And I'm saying generating a lot because, and I wouldn't personally recommend this because it's quite early, but we have things like AI that can help with it as well, right? So let me just expand this back. There's AI can normally generate code. It can generate Solidity contracts, but I would definitely be hesitant in using that just because of security reasons. Always make sure that your smart contracts are audited. These are the things, these are very standard for any smart contracts that get deployed on production. And yeah, I think that's pretty much what I would want to say within tools and SDKs and libraries. Alex, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I mean, I hope this was useful for everyone who just considerations, right? Like there's so much stuff, like you said, it's really hard to just do a specific demo on an RWA because there's so much else that goes behind it. So this really just giving more context, right? To help users go, obviously we're going to roll it off in Spanish on Monday, soon probably, but yeah, like let's, Matt, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Coming up on an hour here, so we don't want to make sure we don't bore listeners too much. But yeah, tons of useful information. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, myself, our full stack team, right, marketing managers, community managers, we're all available in Discord. So let us know. We're here available, and follow us on social media for updates and on X and on Discord. And yeah, thanks, Matt. I really appreciate your time, all your insight.
Thank you, Alex.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me. Thank you,
All right, guys. Yeah.